So why are we told S-curves are the best curves when I always see professionals doing very different curves that change all the time? And when we turn these curves on and off, you can see that they play an extremely big role in the edit. But I actually see not many people using the S-curve, but it's like so promoted out there. I see all these other tutorials giving quite bad advice about using the curves to add contrast, because quite often we want the opposite, and they're completely missing why we need to be focusing on the curves in the first place. And if you don't understand this, your photos will look very generic and like everyone else's, and you'll never achieve your own style that aren't super generic, flat, and look straight out of camera. In the description, I'll give you some free curve presets, and the great thing about curves is once you have good curves that are the style you want, you don't have to change them. You can just roll with them throughout all your edits. So before we completely cover the curves, why do we even want to make sure we understand these tools? So first up is consistency of your edits. Curves, really important for that. We'll get into the nitty-gritty, but that's one reason. Unique styles, you really need to understand the curves to pull off unique styles. You'll learn that if you mess up the curves, they will completely ruin your edit. If you don't learn the curves, you'll be stuck with presets and constraint to one style. And the curves are essential for that polished professional look, whether it's magazines that look a lot better than just out of camera. And another reason is every single edit needs some sort of curve adjustments. Even if they're really minimal, you can't just not do any curve adjustments, in my opinion. We're going to demystify them. This is the only video you have to watch. This is what I learned after my very first camera broke, and all I could do was edit. Unlocking the curves is what let me do those 300 Lightroom tutorials matching styles. So I love teaching how to create styles. The curves, as you can see here, they play a role of like 80% of your edits. Some are pretty crazy, but they're all so important. This is probably going to be the only video on the internet that will directly address why we need to focus on using the curves. Okay, let's get into learning them as a complete beginner. We have 5 little panels here. Now this one, we'll start in this one because this is the one you will spend the most time in. And I'm just going to turn our image black and white for a moment because right now it's easier to understand in black and white. Okay, so this box here, what does it mean? It represents all the pixels in our image. Images are just a bunch of pixels. We've got 2 axes, the y-axis and the x-axis here. So this axis is what pixels do we want to work with in our image. So this tool can help us a little. See how the dot moves up and across our line here? So if we come to the bright wall, it's up the top. If we come over the dark shadows or her skin tone, it changes, okay? So we can click on this line, or with this tool here, we can, if we click, it plots a point, and now we can move that point. Okay, so this point here, we have now grabbed the dark pixels. Do we want to darken the dark pixels, or do we want to brighten the bright pixels? Do we want to brighten the bright pixels or darken the dark pixels? So this axis is brightening or darkening, and then this axis is like, do we want to work with the shadows, which is over here, or do we want to work with the highlights or whites, that is over here? And then just the y-axis is brightening, darkening, but maybe we only want to brighten the brights. So now we can control points. So this is the middle brightness, shadows. So by strategically plotting points, it lets us target brightness. Let's brighten the whites. But if we didn't have this point, 2-finger click and we can delete. So if we didn't have this point, we can't make precise adjustments. So plotting lots of points, that lets you get more precise. Now we can like plot lots of points and get very targeted. Brights, brightening, darkening the brights, brightening the shadows, darkening the shadows. So this little panel here is exactly the same, but we've got sliders. You can see it does the same, it just doesn't use the points like the other one, just uses sliders. And then this can be useful because it gives real nice arcs and you don't have to plot lots of points. Now, this bending of the curve is useful. It makes your changes to light more natural looking. Okay, so if we had really harsh changes from our lighting, it gets gross. So these slow changes and arcs, it gives more natural changes to the light that we're manipulating in our photo. Okay, so we have the red, green, and blue channel now. And why red, green, and blue? So all you have to know is Lightroom, red, green, and blue, we can make any color in the color wheel. All your colors are a combination of red, green, and blue. So if you look at a color wheel, I'll put a free one in the description. What's blue and a little bit of green? It's like this color. So all you have to know is that we can make any color with these three colors. So it can get kind of complicated if you don't understand the color wheel, how you like mixing colors. So that's one thing you have to learn, just how colors mix and what combinations of colors make different colors. And then the other thing you have to learn about this is it works just like the other curve we talked about. So do we like want to place blue in the highlights? So if we do something like this, now we're putting blue in the highlights. Okay, so if we anchor this bit here, now we are putting blue in the highlights. So it works just like the other one, where are we targeting our bright pixels, our dark pixels? Are we adding in blue or are we subtracting blue? Okay, and Lightroom shows the yellow here and shows the blue here. Why is it yellow and blue? They are opposite on the color wheel. We have all the colors in the whole color wheel here. So this tool is giving us the ability to put any color in any pixel of our image. So you can imagine how that really lets us create styles later on. So to help you place colors where you want in your image, let's do a curve, because the more anchor points, the more targeted we can be. Okay, so we have a curve like this. We can copy and we can paste. Now, red, green, and blue all have the same curve. And now you can see no color change now. And that's because we've all got the equal amount of change. So if we want more red in the highlights, more cyan down here, they're opposite in the color wheel. So now we can target the shadows a bit more, red in the shadows. If we didn't have this anchor point, our curve in the highlights would be bending. Sometimes we don't want that. So that's the whole idea with anchor points, dots, to control the shape and how we're adding in color. Because without any dots, we're just adding red to the whole image or subtracting red from the whole image. Okay, so we've got red, green, and blue up here, but say like we remove red, we get this aqua color, this turquoise. But why this color? So this is really important to understand. It's when you remove red from your image, you are getting more green and blue. So look at a color wheel. What color does green and blue make? It makes this color. So it's not that we are adding in this aqua color. It's that we are subtracting red. So we have more green and blue in our image now. Now there is more green and blue and it's giving this color. So that's why it's so important to understand the color wheel. I always provide free color wheels so people can learn this. So when they're trying to make styles, they can refer to the color wheel and know how to push their image towards a certain style. So we're in black and white at the moment, but it's exactly the same if you have color in your image. I just want to make the color adjustments very obvious to you. Okay, there's one more thing to understand about these color channels. They affect contrast just like this curve that we went over. So let's do an S curve here. And let's copy it. Paste. paste. Now we have a strong amount of contrast in this image now, but no color shift because these are all the same. So keep an eye on the contrast, and let's say we do a curve in this channel, reset, reset, reset. Okay, see, this channel is all of these colors being moved at once, and there's no color shift because they're all equal adjustments. So it's really important to understand that these also affect brightness and contrast. It's just that they're way more color sensitive. You'll notice the change in color way before you notice the change in brightness or darkening. But it's actually really, really important to do contrast in the color channels and use them for contrast and not color sometimes to get some styles. A lot of styles really depend on contrast with these color channels and not color. Okay, so these curves are super powerful for styles. When I began, I used to think like I can get any color by just using HSL and the color grading. Like, it's so easy. You just put the green in and then you can just change the colors here. I used to think I could get any color and recreate any style by just playing with HSL and color grading. I would eventually get a unique color to emulate other people's styles, and that's just not true. You have to understand the curves. There is no way of getting the same color or effect as some styles. You can't just rely on HSL and color grading. And just one reason for that is curves is way more precise. You can just target the highlights. We can place colors really precisely, but then we can make any color by just keeping, say, these curves not quite equal. And then we are starting to make any color in the color wheel. By just shifting these slightly not equal, we're making new colors. And we're doing it in a very precise, targeted way. And we are affecting contrast. So there's a lot of overlapping effects just in the curves. That's how you get these styles that seem so incredible, is by understanding this stuff, making your highlights this yellowy blue to complement these deep reds that are a bit more towards purples. So then your blues might be a bit more towards greens, so they're a bit more complementary. So that's getting into color theory, which is also very important to understand. Okay, so you know how the curves work now, but that's kind of pointless if you don't know why to use them or what situations or what direction you are taking this tool. Like, you know how it operates, but just knowing what direction and what it's used for is way different. So what are the curves not for? Curves are not for exposure. Okay, so in the situation of my image looks too dark, I want to make it brighter. That is not what the curves are for. Sometimes a little bit, but in total, not really. Sliders are more for my image is too dark, I need to brighten. And curves are also not for, I want to see the clouds more, I want to this dress, I want to be able to see the detail in the dress. Curves are not for that, that's for sliders. So what are curves for then? Everyone says contrast. Well, they are for reducing contrast, creating different styles: cinematic, wedding, matte, shine, gloss, flattening, blooming your image, smoothing, fading. Okay, so everything that goes into creating a style. Hiding detail, smoothing everything out. Adding contrast is just maybe one of like 10 of the very important things curves do. The contrast slider is for contrast. Curves is much more than that. So I kind of like to think curves are for like pulling your style together. So you do an edit up in the sliders here. Okay, so you brighten, want to see more of the sky back there, so you take the highlights down, maybe the whites because it just looks a bit harsh. And then the curves are for the style. Yeah, the sliders are for exposure more so. They do play a big role in style, the sliders, but way more the curves. Some people approach it like this image, for example. Let's turn the curves off. Sometimes they work in the sliders to bring out more detail. We want more detail in the sky. And then before they come to the curves are already done now, but they have a very flat looking image. The curves is kind of like a blank canvas now. We can brighten or darken anywhere because we've revealed all our detail from, we want more detail in the sky, we want more detail in the blacks, we want less contrast. Then when you get kind of a flat looking image, and then when it's time to come onto the curves, now is time for the precise adjustments in terms of contrast and color to go towards the style you want. So you do all your correcting, maximizing dynamic range up here, making sure you can see everything in the image you want to see, and then it's time to craft your style, create the smoothness, the mattedness, the gloss, cinematic, brightness, just everything to do with style, colors down here in the curves. So I kind of see the curves like kind of pull all your edits together into a style. And curves really play a big role in consistent editing. So for one example is, so Lightroom works in layers. We haven't covered this yet, so it's a bit confusing. Lightroom works in layers where this is one layer, this is the next layer, and your curves overroll your adjustments here. So we can't make anything brighter than this point here. Say if the black point was up here, we can't make anything darker than this now. So the curves have this really big control in the image, and that's how some people get really good looking cohesive Instagram feeds, is because their curves stay the same photo to photo quite a bit, and then your edits up here in the sliders, all these adjustments are constrained within this brightness. Nothing can be darker here, none of these midtones can be brighter up here. It's all constraint here, and having these constraints on your brightness can lead to having quite consistent looking feeds photo to photo. Your whites and your brightness isn't jumping around all these different exposure levels. And then same for the color, your colors will stay very consistent. Okay, let's go over a bunch of examples from the 300 Lightroom tutorials I did, so you can see the curves in action and start to implement it yourself. So I would have never learned all this if my camera didn't break, because no one would have put in the amount of time into replicating these edits. So I really like this one. So this one's just down in the mids. That's going to really drop the exposure throughout most of the image. You can see how it's going to create a bit of a brightness up in the brighter brights. So he's got a bit of a cinematic filmic look, I would describe it as. And then just a little bit of color work here. You can see how bringing in those skin tones to be more of a purple when we play with that. So this little adjustment, we are pushing purple in. Why are we pushing purple in? We have a lot of green in the shadows, so tools are interacting. Here's another example of really strong color channel. So you can see how we have a little less blue in the mids, so we get all this warmth throughout the middle, really strong. A fade. This one was just really subtle, a little bit of a fade there going on. I really liked this tutorial from Watch Luke. Really strong color channels, again, important for this style. And for its colors as well. This one was pretty good too. Strong color channels. Big drop here for the brightness. So this image is actually from student turned pro editor. So I loved how she made it overall a bit more cinematic, and a curve like this for a little bit of a fade. This sort of adjustment helps keep it kind of cinematic, so we can target the clouds there. We don't want them too bright. We've got a few color adjustments going on. I like how she added a little bit of a greenish blue. Yeah, I like her other ones as well. So there's before, after. Even did some YouTube tutorials on her style that she developed in the course. So this one is an example of strong color channels and then a really faded curve here. Big change here. Again, going with that cinematic look, curves like that. I quite like this one, like giving such a filmic look with such strong shadow lifts. And then there's obviously very important color channels going on. So this is going to underexpose the image by bringing this down. And then we're going to get a bit of a fade. And then the whites are coming down, so the clouds. So this overall just makes it darker, moodier, more cinematic. And then we've got the strong color channels going on. This one's especially strong color channels and especially fade in this channel. But it creates a really nice effect. So it like flattens the image. It really gives that like matted look that people are really after, kind of glossy and shiny. You have something like this, and then it gets really softened, gives that like summer feeling vibe. So again, with a strong color channel curves, like we always want that contrast from the color channels, and then with the taking out contrast with this channel. I love this tutorial we did. Lots of color and lots of contrast from the curves. Rich colors as well. So that's thanks to these channels here, and a bit of a fade. Again, with the mixing of the color channels, smoothing here. This one is really, really important for that orange and teal look a lot of people like for an after. Pulling blue out of the highlights adds in this warmth. If it's a green and a red, you look at the color wheel. So we're going to have more of a yellow, warmth, orange in the highlights. And then it comes all the way down to the midtones, adding in that warmth. And the shadows, it kind of switches over. Okay, so there's a bit more blue in the shadows or the blacks, and that balances out your colors that you put in the midtones and the highlights. So you can see how powerful these are to create these unique color palettes. And smoothing out landscapes here, I liked this tutorial. Strong S curves and the color channels. So you're actually doing the opposite to adding in contrast most of the time with this channel here. It's kind of funny. Training your eye can take a long time. It took me a few years and make an intense practice. By the 300 tutorial mark, I felt like I could really create any style. So editing's never been so important, but if you want to get to that stage where I am, you just know what an image needs. Learning lots of different styles lets you see patterns and what's the differences and what's the commonalities between styles. Lets you connect the dots of what's going on. I'm probably the only person in the world that learned this way, and it just let me learn 1,000 times faster. I like a system to editing, formulas, like what's the science behind this all. I want to get more in depth into styles rather than tips and tricks. And please leave a comment just what you found useful in this video, and catch you in the next one.